Hey everybody, welcome back to Mobile, Alabama in the Senior Bowl, wrapping up day 2 of 3. Kyle Youmans alongside David Helman, joined by our very special guest. Former NFL player and NFL scout, Bucky Brooks. Bucky, once again, thanks for joining us. It's not going to be it's the first time you're joining us, but it's not going to be the last time. We're going to see plenty of Bucky over the next couple of days. And first off, just kind of looking at the second practice, we got another chance to look at this Southern team and really kind of get a better look at those guys overall after seeing them yesterday. What were some things that stood out to you?
Well, one, like the second practice is always a better practice because they're in full pads. The nerves are kind of out of it. So now they're beginning to play like the way that we saw them play during the regular season. So my initial impression is, one, there's a lot of talent. Defensively, there are a lot of guys to kind of keep your eye on, guys that I think are going to be immediate contributors. And so when you're an evaluator and you're down here and you're looking at guys, you want guys that can pop, but can they do it consistently over days? I think we begin to see some of those guys that can do it.
It really seemed like defense, of course, is always on the forefront of the mind of the Cowboys heading into this draft season, but it really seemed like some of those defensive guys shined throughout the course of that second practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've seen the consistency, like, up front. Like, we can talk about those guys like Javon Kinlaw and some of the other guys that play up front. Then in the back end, the DBs that we're beginning to see consistently make plays, the Darnell Holmes, the Kyle Duggar, some of those other guys. And so as you begin to monitor the practices each day, you want to see guys that consistently play at a high level because they're typically going to translate to the guys that play at a high level at the next level.
Which you just set me up perfectly, Bucky, because I can hear you Cowboys fans. Safety. I know. I get it. We talk about it every year. And a guy that has flashed through 2 days consistently is Kyle Duggar. Lenore Ryan, which I had never heard of. Division II, he's out here playing with the SEC and the Big 12 and looking really good doing it. I mean, what are your impressions?
So anytime that you're looking at a small school guy, when you have him in this kind of environment, you want to make sure that they are not only comfortable playing at this level, but they flash. And I think the thing that I've seen, he's not only flashed, but he's been a consistent high performer. He is a guy that can play anywhere and everywhere in that back end. Free safety, strong safety. There's been conversation about could he play down in the box at linebacker, could he go out the corner. I think the thing that's most impressive about him is his instincts, his awareness, and his natural ball skills. And so for a guy that played at a small school to kind of have that knack for being around the ball and being able to consistently make plays, he certainly looks like he could be a guy that could be maybe a top 50 player, someone that you really, really talk about.
Which, and I mean, this goes without saying, but how important is it? I mean, his tape is Division II. He's not going to be playing against a lot of high-quality players, but he comes out here and is able to do it against that high level of competition.
It's very important because what you want to see from a small school guy is if he's playing Division II competition, does he dominate? And he has dominated. So now when you put him in an environment with some of the guys from the top schools, does he look like a fish out of water? He doesn't. Now you're beginning to see, hey, is he a playmaker? Is he one of the best ones that are in the game? And I think we can kind of say, hey, this guy has a chance to be one of the better safeties in the class. Where does he fit? And then it becomes, how does he fit into the scheme that we're talking about and playing it?
And we kind of tabbed him yesterday as the best safety that we've seen as a part of this Reese's Senior Bowl group. And two things that I saw observation-wise with Kyle Duggar today. One, he was returning punts. And you talked about the ball skills and just kind of the uncanny ability to have that awareness and to be able to utilize that on defense. Well, he got a chance to show it off on special teams as well. And then also, I mentioned this to Dave earlier while we were kind of standing in one of these end zones. The smallest school guy potentially on the entire field walking over, cross paths with probably the biggest name entering the event in Jalen Hurts, and both of them kind of shared a moment and dapped each other up. I thought that was just kind of cool to look at. But while we're sticking with small school guys, I want to turn our attention to the tight end position. And you mentioned a name a couple of moments ago from Florida Atlantic, Harrison Bryant, and what he's been able to do at the tight end spot. What did you see from him and a potential look at FAU tight end?
Harrison Bryant, to me, is probably the most pro-ready tight end here. And the reason I say he's the most pro-ready is as you look at the evolution of the game, the tight end has to do a little bit of everything. He's a flex tight end. He's the inline tight end. He's an H-back. He catches the ball on the perimeter, but he's also a sticky blocker on the edge. When I look at Harrison Bryant, he does all of those things. And talking to him, the comparisons that he brought up, Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce. So when you close your eyes and you watch him play and then you envision how he could be at the next level, you can see him doing some of those things. He potentially could be a mismatch creator on the perimeter, and that's what the game is evolving to. You're looking for guys that can give you advantages in the passing game. He is someone that looks like he can do that.
It seemed like yesterday, whenever you were talking to him as well at the podium, he was saying, I want to model myself after George Kittle. And if you're saying he's one of the best pro-rated tight ends here, I'm not saying George Kittle by any means, but definitely high praise at the moment.
We actually, we got a chance to talk to Will McClay, the Cowboys Vice President of Personnel today, kind of talking about how the change in coaching staff, Mike McCarthy coming on board, is going to change what they're looking for, might tweak what they're interested in. I have a feeling, though, with Ezekiel Elliott in this offensive line, they're still going to be looking for tight ends that block. So that is extra important to me, is if there's a guy here that can do a little bit of everything, I think the Cowboys are always going to be interested in that.
So here's what's funny about Mike McCarthy. Having known him well, like having played under him when he was in Kansas City as the quarterback coach, and then continue to have that relationship. When he talks about tight ends, he believes in having multiple tight ends. And he will tell you that when you have multiple tight ends, one of those can be a traditional blocking tight end, but if you can have another guy that can do a little bit of everything, it really creates advantages when you go to that 12 personnel package, one back, two tight ends, and being able to do things. So as you think about the Cowboys evolving their offense, they do need a tight end that can kind of play that flex slot position while also coming into the backfield. It would be nice to have someone that can dominate inside the numbers to make life easy for Dak Prescott.
I can hear Cowboys fans screaming about Blake Jarwin, but there's opportunities to go around. It's interesting to think what they might do with that position.
We even mentioned that on the draft show a week or two ago with KT. I think Kevin Turner brought it up and said, hey, what about the opportunities of putting two tight ends in a set and running that as well? So, hey, tight end never out of the question, especially in those later rounds. But in the earlier rounds, once again, defense is the priority.
It seems that way.
It seems that way. But Javon Kinlaw, of course, one of those names that continues to come up. Came up a little limp at the end of practice, was favoring one of his legs, and didn't return to action after he had kind of tweaked something. But before the injury, we'll stick away from that for now. But before that, what did you see out of Javon?
Dominant player. He's every bit as good as some of the top players that have come down here and dominated. Wow. Now, I'm not going to put him in the Aaron Donald category, but like when we were here years ago, we saw Aaron Donald play and dominate inside. Kinlaw has that kind of ability. And the reason I'm saying he has that kind of ability, when you look at him, his size, his length, his first step quickness, he does that. When you watched him in the one-on-ones, when they were kind of playing off those reach blocks, his ability to long arm and stay in his gap is something that's critical. And as the Cowboys evolve their defense under Mike Nolan, whether it's a 4-3 or a 3-4, having versatile interior players give you an opportunity to do a bunch of different things. With his length, look, people are talking about him being a 3 technique playing over the guard, but maybe he's long enough to also play that 5 technique spot if they move to a 3-4. He gives them a lot of versatility if he's a guy that is available in the middle of the first round.
And you would want him playing 3 technique, but he could probably play 1 as well.
Yeah, I think he can play right over top of the center. Look, you saw the quickness. You saw him consistently knock the center back. The thing that you have to have when you're building a dominant defensive line, you got to be able to play on the other side of the line of scrimmage. What we saw, his power is real, and I think he's heavy-handed while also being very, very quick. Hard to find that kind of combination in a frontline guy.
And you mentioned, before we went on the segment, you don't think he'll be there at pick 17. That's how impressive.
Potentially, like it's funny because it's always hard to find those guys. But typically in the draft, those interior guys, they kind of fall back to the pack unless they're special pass rushing guys. And so maybe he's sitting there at 17 when the Cowboys are picking.
That's going to be a name to circle. I mean, it's we've already talked about him. It's obvious, but I don't think it's going to go away over the next couple months, nor should it.
No, I think that's a guy that I think Cowboys fans in general should be looking at and really kind of continuing to dive deeper in over the next couple of months. And I was sitting up with Nate Newton while those drills were going on. He said, man, if he can get those hands inside and stay away from the outside of a smaller interior offensive lineman, he's tough to block, and it's going to be tough overall.
It is going to be tough, and that was the thing that you hear the coaching point. The coaching point was hands inside, walking back, eat his grass. And so when you watch Kinlaw was quick off the snap, and then his hands were immediately inside. You could see the penetration. You could see him kind of control the line of scrimmage. And depending on how the defense is structured, whether it's a one-gap penetrating defense or one where maybe you have that interior player occupy 2 gaps, he appears to have the kind of body and the length to be able to do both things.
Man, it's going to be fun to watch over the next couple of months, and you can continue to watch more Bucky Brooks coming up with us tomorrow at 11 a.m. on DallasCowboys.com, also on the Draft Show on Twitter as well. But for David Helman, for Bucky Brooks, I'm Kyle Youmans saying so long for now. We'll see you tomorrow afternoon here on DallasCowboys.com.